For thousands of years, one mysterious story has captured the imagination of people around the world. The story of Atlantis, the legendary lost city that supposedly disappeared beneath the sea. Was Atlantis a real civilization that once existed, only to be destroyed by a catastrophic disaster? Or was it simply a philosophical story created by an ancient Greek thinker? The mystery has never been completely solved, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes Atlantis so fascinating. Even today, historians, archaeologists, oceanographers, and explorers continue to debate whether there could be some truth hidden behind the ancient legend.
The story of Atlantis comes to us mainly from the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who lived more than 2,000 years ago. Around the 4th century BC, Plato described Atlantis in two of his famous dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. According to Plato, Atlantis was not a small island or an ordinary kingdom. It was an enormous and powerful civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a name the ancient Greeks used for the area around the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Mediterranean Sea meets the Atlantic Ocean. Plato presented Atlantis as a wealthy and technologically advanced society with magnificent cities, enormous temples, powerful armies, and extraordinary natural resources. According to the story, Atlantis was a vast island surrounded by the ocean. At its center stood a magnificent capital city built around a series of enormous circular waterways. Imagine looking down from the sky and seeing rings of land and water surrounding one another, connected by bridges and canals. At the very center was an impressive hill where the rulers of Atlantis lived. The city was filled with beautiful buildings, golden decorations, gardens, fountains, and enormous temples. Plato described the temple dedicated to Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, as one of the most spectacular structures in the entire city.
Atlantis was said to possess incredible wealth. Its people had access to precious metals, fertile farmland, forests, animals, and abundant water. Plato even described a mysterious metal called orichalcum, which was supposedly extremely valuable and almost as precious as gold. The Atlanteans used their resources to construct massive buildings, roads, canals, ports, and defensive walls. Their society appeared organized, powerful, and wealthy beyond anything known to many ancient Greeks. But the story of Atlantis is not simply a story about wealth and power. At the heart of Plato's account is a warning about human ambition. According to the legend, the people of Atlantis were originally noble and disciplined. They respected their laws and lived according to the principles established by their ancestors. But as the civilization became richer and more powerful, its people gradually became arrogant. They wanted more territory, more influence, and more control over other nations. Their desire for power eventually transformed Atlantis from a prosperous kingdom into an aggressive empire. Plato claimed that Atlantis attempted to conquer other lands, including parts of Europe and Africa. However, one civilization stood against them, Athens. In Plato's story, ancient Athens represented courage, discipline, justice, and self-control. The Athenians managed to resist the powerful Atlantean army and defeat them. But then something even more dramatic happened. According to Plato, the gods decided that Atlantis had become too corrupt and needed to be punished.
Plato wrote that earthquakes and floods struck the island, and in a single terrible day and night, Atlantis disappeared beneath the sea. The once magnificent civilization was swallowed by the ocean, leaving behind only mystery. Plato suggested that the catastrophe occurred thousands of years before his own time, meaning that Atlantis, if his story was historical, would have existed long before classical Greece. This raises one of the greatest questions surrounding the legend. Why did Plato tell this story? Was he describing a real place, or was Atlantis simply a fictional civilization created to teach a lesson? Many historians believe Atlantis was a philosophical invention. Plato frequently used fictional conversations and imaginary societies to explain his ideas about politics, morality, justice, and human behavior. In this interpretation, Atlantis was designed as a warning. It represented what could happen when a powerful society became consumed by greed, arrogance, and ambition. Athens, on the other hand, represented the kind of disciplined and virtuous society Plato admired. There is another interesting detail. Plato claimed that the story of Atlantis had been passed down through ancient Egyptian priests and eventually reached the Greek statesman Solon. According to the story, Solon traveled to Egypt and learned about an ancient civilization that had existed thousands of years earlier. Egyptian priests supposedly told him about Atlantis and its conflict with Athens. Solon then brought the story back to Greece, where it was eventually passed down through generations until Plato recorded it. But there is a problem. No Egyptian document has ever been discovered that clearly describes Atlantis in the way Plato did. No ancient Egyptian inscription has been found confirming that priests told Solon about a lost island empire. This has led many scholars to believe that Plato created the Egyptian connection as part of the story to make Atlantis appear ancient and historically credible.
Yet the mystery becomes more complicated when we look at real ancient civilizations that experienced catastrophic destruction. One of the most famous possibilities is the island of Santorini, located in the Aegean Sea. Thousands of years ago, Santorini was home to the advanced Minoan civilization. Around the 2nd millennium BC, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history occurred in the region. The eruption was enormous. It destroyed much of the island, sent volcanic ash high into the atmosphere, and generated powerful tsunamis that may have affected nearby coastal settlements. The Minoans were an advanced civilization with impressive architecture, sophisticated art, trade networks, and large settlements. Their society flourished on the island of Crete and other parts of the Aegean region. Because their civilization experienced a major natural disaster, some people have suggested that memories of the event could have contributed to the Atlantis legend. Santorini is especially interesting because its ancient landscape does not look like an ordinary island. The volcanic eruption dramatically changed its shape. Today, the island is famous for its enormous crescent-shaped cliffs surrounding a flooded volcanic caldera. Looking at the landscape, it is easy to understand why people have imagined that some ancient civilization could have been destroyed there.
However, there is a major problem with identifying Santorini as Atlantis. The dates do not perfectly match Plato's account, and the geography is different. Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, far from the Aegean Sea. Santorini is located in the eastern Mediterranean. So while the volcanic eruption may provide a possible inspiration for parts of a story, there is no solid evidence that Santorini was Atlantis. Other theories have placed Atlantis in many different locations around the world. Some researchers have suggested areas near Spain, Morocco, the Canary Islands, the Azores, the Caribbean, Antarctica, or even parts of the Atlantic Ocean. Over the centuries, explorers and writers have proposed dozens of possible locations. Some theories are based on geology, others on ancient maps, legends, underwater structures, or interpretations of Plato's descriptions. One popular theory connects Atlantis with the Atlantic coast of Spain. In the early 21st century, some researchers suggested that the region around the marshlands of southern Spain might contain evidence of the lost civilization. Satellite images revealed unusual circular patterns and structures that some people believed could be the remains of ancient settlements. However, archaeologists have generally rejected the idea that these structures prove the existence of Atlantis. Natural processes and known ancient settlements can explain many of the features.
Another theory points toward the Azores, a group of volcanic islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Their location has attracted attention because they lie west of Portugal and were formed by volcanic activity. Some people have wondered whether these islands could represent the remains of a much larger landmass that once existed in the Atlantic. But modern geology provides no convincing evidence that a continent-sized island corresponding to Plato's Atlantis suddenly disappeared beneath the sea in the way the legend describes. The search for Atlantis has also led people beneath the ocean. Advances in underwater technology have allowed scientists to explore places that were once almost impossible to reach. Sonar systems, remotely operated vehicles, deep-sea cameras, and underwater mapping have revealed ancient shipwrecks, submerged landscapes, and archaeological sites. These discoveries have shown that sea levels have changed dramatically throughout human history and that human settlements really have been swallowed by the sea. This fact is important because the idea of a lost civilization beneath the water is not completely impossible. During the last ice age, enormous amounts of water were locked inside glaciers. As the planet warmed, sea levels rose, flooding coastal regions where ancient humans had lived. Entire landscapes that were once dry land are now underwater.
Around the world, archaeologists have discovered submerged settlements and structures. Ancient communities have been found beneath the Mediterranean and other seas. These discoveries prove that real cities can disappear beneath the water, but they do not prove the existence of Atlantis. The ocean itself creates another problem for the Atlantis mystery. If a civilization as enormous and powerful as Plato described truly existed, we would expect to find archaeological evidence: buildings, pottery, tools, weapons, roads, inscriptions, human remains, or other artifacts. So far, no discovery has been universally accepted as evidence of Atlantis. That does not stop the mystery from continuing. Over the centuries, Atlantis has become much more than an ancient Greek story. It has transformed into a cultural symbol of the unknown. Writers, filmmakers, scientists, explorers, and conspiracy theorists have all created their own interpretations of the lost city. In modern popular culture, Atlantis is often imagined as a technologically advanced civilization, possessing knowledge far beyond its time. Some stories claim that Atlanteans possessed advanced machines, mysterious energy sources, or extraordinary scientific knowledge. Others suggest that survivors escaped before the destruction and carried their knowledge to Egypt, Central America, or other ancient civilizations. Some even claim that Atlantis was connected to the origins of civilization itself. There is no reliable archaeological evidence supporting these extraordinary claims. However, they demonstrate how powerful the Atlantis story has become. It has evolved from Plato's philosophical tale into one of the world's most famous legends. Perhaps the most fascinating question is not whether Atlantis existed exactly as Plato described it, but whether Plato's story was inspired by real events. Ancient people experienced enormous natural disasters. Earthquakes destroyed cities, volcanic eruptions buried settlements, tsunamis swept across coastlines, floods transformed landscapes. Civilizations collapsed because of war, climate change, disease, economic problems, and political instability. Stories about these events could have been passed from one generation to another and transformed over time.
This is one possible explanation for Atlantis. Another possibility is that Atlantis never existed at all. Perhaps Plato simply created the story to make a philosophical argument. If that is true, then the lost city was never meant to be found. It was meant to make people think. Plato's message remains surprisingly relevant today. Atlantis represents a society that possesses enormous wealth and power, but loses its sense of responsibility. Its people become proud, aggressive, and obsessed with expansion. Their downfall reminds us that technological or military power does not automatically make a civilization wise or successful. In this interpretation, Atlantis is not really about a lost island. It is about humanity. The story asks a timeless question. What happens when a civilization becomes powerful enough to believe that nothing can destroy it?
Throughout history, great empires have risen and fallen. The Roman Empire, once one of the most powerful political systems in the ancient world, eventually collapsed. Other civilizations have disappeared because of war, environmental changes, political instability, or economic decline. The ruins left behind remind us that no civilization is permanent. Perhaps this is why Atlantis continues to fascinate us. We know that ancient cities can disappear. We know that landscapes can be transformed by earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and rising seas. We know that ancient civilizations have been forgotten and later rediscovered. We also know that enormous portions of the ocean remain difficult to explore. But none of this proves Atlantis. The search continues because the possibility is emotionally powerful. Somewhere beneath the waves, people imagine enormous stone walls covered in coral, ancient statues lying in darkness, temples hidden beneath layers of sediment, and forgotten streets waiting to be discovered. For explorers, the dream is irresistible. One day, a deep-sea expedition might uncover something that changes our understanding of ancient history. But what would happen if scientists actually discovered a city that matched Plato's description? It would be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. It would force historians to reconsider what we know about ancient civilization, technology, trade, and geography. Museums around the world would compete to study the artifacts. Scientists would investigate how the city was destroyed. Historians would compare its inscriptions and architecture with those of Greece, Egypt, and other ancient societies. But until such evidence appears, Atlantis remains exactly what it has always been, a mystery. There is another reason the legend is so difficult to abandon. Humanity has always been fascinated by lost worlds. We dream about places that existed before recorded history, civilizations whose names have disappeared, and knowledge that may have been forgotten. Atlantis represents the ultimate lost world, a civilization that supposedly reached extraordinary heights before vanishing almost completely. And perhaps that is the true power of the story.
The mystery began with Plato more than 2,000 years ago, but it has never really ended. Every generation discovers the story again. New technologies create new possibilities. Underwater maps reveal new landscapes. Archaeologists uncover ancient settlements. Scientists learn more about volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, climate change, and sea level rise. And every new discovery raises the same question. Could there be something behind the legend? For now, the answer remains unknown.
No confirmed ruins of Atlantis have been found. No inscription has definitively identified its location. No archaeological discovery has proven that Plato's enormous island empire existed exactly as he described it. Yet the search continues, not necessarily because scientists believe the legend must be true, but because searching for the truth about the ancient world can lead to discoveries that are fascinating even when they have nothing to do with Atlantis. Maybe Atlantis was a real civilization destroyed by a natural disaster. Maybe it was inspired by the destruction of the Minoan world and other ancient catastrophes. Maybe it was a combination of old stories, historical memories, and Plato's imagination. Or perhaps it was entirely fictional. We may never know. But imagine standing on a quiet beach at sunset, looking toward the endless horizon. Beneath those waves are thousands of years of human history. Ships have sunk there, coastlines have changed, cities have disappeared. People once lived, loved, traded, fought, built, and dreamed in places that today are covered by water. And that is why enormous underwater world may be stories we have not yet discovered. And that is why Atlantis refuses to disappear. The lost city may never be found, but its legend continues to remind us of something deeply human. Our civilizations feel permanent while we are living in them, yet history has shown again and again that nothing built by humanity lasts forever. Cities can fall, kingdoms can vanish, knowledge can be forgotten, and sometimes the sea can erase almost every trace that a world ever existed. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Atlantis is not where the city disappeared, but why the story has survived for more than 2,000 years. Maybe it survived because people want to believe that the past still holds secrets. Maybe it survived because we are fascinated by the possibility of discovering something that everyone thought was impossible. Or maybe it survived because Atlantis is a mirror. It shows us what humanity can build when it reaches great heights, and what can happen when power becomes more important than wisdom. Until the ocean gives up its secrets, Atlantis will remain somewhere between history, mythology, and imagination. A city lost beneath the waves, a civilization swallowed by time, and one of the greatest mysteries humanity has ever imagined.